Persian Gulf War, the reason behind its start, the actions President Bush took, and the conclusion yesterday with the agreement of Saddam Hussein to cease fire. Along with that, we have some never-before-seen footage taken during the war with our frontline photographer, Eric Clausen.
We'll also have an interview with an environmentalist, Dr. Ahmed Ali, who has agreed to talk to us about the environmental effects of this war.
And after the break, as usual, Calvin will have all the sports and weather you can handle on this beautiful Monday morning.
In this time of war and afterwards, you too can show your support for the troops in the Gulf. American forces are working hard in the Persian Gulf to protect the freedom of Kuwait. Show that you support this cause by wearing yellow ribbons. It is a great way to show that you care for your country. Wear them on your clothes, on your backpacks, tie them to your mailboxes, hang them on your trees. You too can pick up yellow ribbons at any gift store, and it really shows you care. Even if you don't have relatives in the Gulf, a yellow ribbon shows that you think about the men and women who are there. Thank you.
Now for our top story, the Persian Gulf before, during, and after.
The Persian Gulf War was caused by Iraq's invasion of Kuwait on August 2, 1990. Iraq's president, Saddam Hussein, invaded Kuwait to gain the benefits of Kuwait's oil-rich deposits, not counting on the reactions of the rest of the world.
4 days later, the Security Council of the United Nations imposed a mandatory embargo on trade with Iraq. Saddam had no market to sell his oil and no allies either.
Following the embargo, on November 29, 1990, the United Nations Council approved a resolution allowing member countries to use all necessary means to remove Iraqi forces from Kuwait if they were not withdrawn by January 15, 1991.
Even before the resolution was passed, large numbers of forces from America, from Great Britain, and from 27 other countries, including Arab states, had been prepared for an attack a little more than 3 months. We were not about to let Iraq conquer Kuwait.
After the January deadline had passed, there had been no movement of Iraqi forces to begin, or even start to begin, a march out of Kuwait. In answer to this refusal, the American general, Norman Schwarzkopf, led the anti-Iraqi coalition in a bombardment of Baghdad and other areas of Iraq on June 16, 1991.
After being set upon by anti-Iraqi forces, Saddam tried to bring Israel into the war by repeated bombings of Tel Aviv. Hussein figured if Israel followed its policy of fighting back when attacked, then other Arab nations which had a dislike for Israel would join the war on the side of Iraq.
The United Nations asked Israel not to counterattack, even though innocent Israeli people were being killed. Israel knew what the devastating consequences of their counterattack would do to the anti-Iraqi movement. Resisting retaliation, Israel sat back and watched as their land was bombed by Iraq. Americans didn't help to lessen the burden on Israel by using Patriot anti-missile missiles to shoot down Iraqi Scuds. With the high success rate of the Patriots, Israeli damage was kept considerably down.
Anti-Iraqi forces continued to bombard Baghdad and other Iraqi cities in what is now considered the fiercest, most unrelenting campaign of air bombardment in history. After the airstrikes on February 23, 1991, the war on the ground began. On the first day of this war, thousands of Iraqi soldiers surrendered, almost without a fight. The war continued this way, with the number of Iraqi prisoners growing continuously until on February 26, 1991, when Kuwait City was recaptured by anti-Iraqi forces.
On the next day, the Republican Guard, the major force of Iraqis, was captured and the Iraqi army was beaten. On the 28th of February, yesterday, Saddam Hussein agreed to a ceasefire ordered by President George Bush, and the war was over. It took only 100 hours of ground fighting to round up all of the Iraqi soldiers.
All in all, I think President Bush did a rather nice job.
I should say so. Hussein's plot of oil dominance failed completely thanks to the United States and the other countries of the United Nations.
After the break, we'll have never-before-seen footage with Eric, Dr. Ahmed Ali, the environmentalist, and of course, weather and sports with Calvin.
We have noticed with the dispute in the Gulf, many gas companies have decided to raise their prices on their gasoline, unlike us, which is why you can always depend on Shell gasoline to save you a dime and take you the extra mile. So remember, when your tank is low and you need a great gas at an affordable price, remember, Shell should be your choice.
Checking out of the tape. These are just some of my experiences in the Gulf. Here we see a Tomcat taking off from its carrier. Here's some actual gun footage of missiles hitting their targets within Iraqi Air Force bases. Here we see a Tomahawk missile launching off its battleship. Here we see on the carrier again the Tomcat's about to land. This is that first incredible night where all the Iraqi anti-aircraft guns were trying to take out the American bombers but had no shots. Here we see a Tomahawk cruise missile homing in on its target. Boom! Tomahawks use a Tercom guidance system. It helps through the terrain to find their target. They also use a digital scene mapping area correlation guidance system, which, as you can see here, how it works. It flies over its target and blows up right over it, as you just saw. This shows how Iraqi radar would be taken out. First, you would take out the central headquarters, then the substations, and finally the actual radars themselves. This makes the guns absolutely useless. Here we see an F-117 Blackjet taking off on a mission. This is the historic mission where they actually dropped the bomb straight down the air shaft of a building. If you watch closely, you can see it. Boom! There it hit.
Available to us today, we were also able to get some incredible satellite shots from Hussein's private house deep within Iraq. The following clips are exclusive, folks. You're in for a treat. Ooh, that's gotta hurt. That was my experience in the Gulf, and now back to you, Sean.
Thanks for that great footage, Eric.
Up next, I believe our in-studio reporter, Jeremy Groves, as environmentalist Dr. Ali, here to talk to us about the issues concerning the environment.
Take it away, Jeremy.
Thank you, Sean and Dave. I'm about to talk with Dr. Ahmed Ali. It's Ahmed. Of course, Ahmed, who is a native citizen of Kuwait and has spent a number of months in the belly of the beast, so to speak. Thank you for coming on our show, Dr. Ali. Glad to be here. Now on to business. I'm sure there isn't a person watching who hasn't at least some basic knowledge of the ecological havoc wreaked by Saddam Hussein upon the Persian Gulf. But why? Was there any point to it?
Of course not. Anyone could tell you that. The Iraqi troops, from what I saw, were pure sadists. They looted and pillaged almost every major scientific installation. Places that were of no threat to anyone, even zoos. In my opinion, they are criminals.
Agreed. Now everyone knows that there are two major disasters unleashed by the Iraqis. First, the lighting of over 500 oil wells throughout Kuwaiti oil fields, and dumping of as many as 6 million barrels of oil into the Persian Gulf. Tell me, how did the Iraqi troops go about lighting these fires?
Well, it began in early February, when they placed the first charges of dynamite in the various wells. The charges of dynamite each had sandbags on top of them, as to direct the blast downward, which would all be detonated by an electric charge. Soon, there were hundreds of toxic infernos reaching as high as 200 feet in the air.
And how has this affected air quality?
Well, unfortunately, the air is just on the borderline of breathable by humans. In fact, each day, 500,000 tons of pollutants are released into the air.
Such as?
Well, the most notable pollutant is the substance which causes acid rain. the outcome of which we have yet to fully experience in the Middle East.
How far have the pollutants reached so far?
Obviously, with so much smog being released into the air, it should come as no surprise that the effects have been felt as far away as the mountains of India, where there have been reports of snow blackened by the aerial pollution, 1,500 miles from where it began.
And what of the people to begin with? How has it affected those living in areas most affected by the fires?
From what I've heard, the most obvious effects have been in the way of respiratory problems, asthma, throat infections, and so on. However, there is greater concern over the future effects. There is no telling if the smoke coming from the infernos is cancer-causing, and if so, potent.
Frightful indeed, but what about people's lives?
Well, obviously, it's very difficult living in a war zone that has been literally disemboweled by the enemy. But it's even worse when you're living in a cesspool of dirt, smoke, and heat. Spending 5 minutes in the open air means spending an hour in the bathtub.
And what about plants, animals, and farming in general? Is anything still alive in Kuwait?
The oil and smog are literally choking and starving plants. They would have a better chance growing in Antarctica in midwinter. The situation with animals is almost as critical. I have heard from farmers throughout Kuwait that many chickens stopped laying eggs when the pollution began getting heavy. Another problem is that the pollutants quite often poison the milk from animals such as cattle and sheep, among other things. Of course, you're lucky if you have any livestock living after the actions of the Iraqi troops.
Very well. We've spent a good deal of time on the oil infernos. Now on to the oil slick in the Persian Gulf. How much oil is spread over the Gulf, and how far?
Since the oil was first spilled into the Persian Gulf, it has covered about half of the Kuwaiti coast and about 1/3 of the Arabian coast, extending about halfway across the Gulf. Luckily, it has been kept somewhat at bay by circular currents.
Has it washed up on the beaches yet?
Certainly. In fact, that is where it hits the hardest. To begin with, the oil washes up and mixes with the sand and water, creating a thick, gloppy substance that is extremely stubborn to clean up.
Now I'm sure everyone on the television in the free world has seen the pictures of birds completely immersed in crude oil. Give me a picture, in general, of how the tides of crude oil have affected natural life on the shores of the Persian Gulf.
Well, you could think of the problem this way. Any major ecological zone is like a machine, and the advent of the oil spill was like throwing a monkey wrench into that machine. Every aspect of life is disturbed, from nourishment to reproduction.
Well, that should be expected.
Of course, but it is much easier to understand the problem when you look at examples such as the plight of the turtles of the Persian Gulf. The problem began as mating season approached. You see, we were extremely concerned because the beaches and islands where the turtles normally crawl ashore to reproduce once a year were barely recognizable as beaches, being so covered with oil, debris, and such.
So how did you solve the problem?
Well, for a while, we were concerned that we might not solve the problem. However, thanks to assistance from the British and American Marines, we were able to clear 4 islands for the mating season, and subsequently, things became a little bit better for the situation in the Gulf.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that there's enough international interest, and more importantly, the turtles will be able to continue living in the Gulf for years to come.
As am I. However, there is the matter of the birds. They tend to be far more sensitive to oil than almost anything else. The trouble is that the second that a bird, of whatever species, comes in contact with oil, it will begin to lose many of its natural abilities, as well as polluting its own systems.
How much of an effort has there been to save dining birds?
Well, in recent months, response, especially in the way of supplies and volunteers, has been overwhelming. Even members of the military have spent time in any one of the wildlife rehabilitation centers throughout the Gulf, and generally, our efforts are successful. A good amount of birds taken in are successfully detarred, fed, and rehydrated. Since oil halts their metabolism, they need to be rehydrated to get their metabolism going again.
When are the birds deemed ready to return to nature?
Well, once they are in normal health and their feathers have regained full repellence to water, which is vital to the survival of waterfowl, there is no reason why they can't be returned to a safe habitat.
Well, that's very good to hear.
It is.
So, Dr. Ali, in closing, what would you say are the prospects for the future of the Persian Gulf region and its environment?
Well, we have to be realistic. Things may never be back to normal, if at all, not for many decades to come. Luckily, there is a great deal of interest in the plight of all life in the Middle East that has been touched by Saddam Hussein's irrational criminal acts so I am confident that things may go quicker than expected. I only wish that the life of millions of plants and animals were considered as significant as that of a handful of humans. Maybe then we wouldn't have situations like this.
Agreed. Well, I'd like to once again thank you, Dr. Lee. And back to you, Sean.
Very interesting, Jeremy, and thank you, Dr. Ali.
Or should we say Ahmed?
That's Ahmed. I never knew so much damage could be caused by an oil spill.
The damage to the environment is a really big issue. Luckily, new technology is making it easier to clean up those kinds of spills.
Let's hope it doesn't happen again.
After the break, we will have Weather with Kavin.
Chocolate bars all mushy.
What's that you say? Your chocolate bar's all mushy? If you have this problem, worry no longer. The desert bar is here. This little bar can stand temperatures up to 150 degrees. It's great when you're swimming, exercising, anything in the sun, anytime you're outside. These bars are also used by the troops in the Persian Gulf. They're used to give that extra added kick of energy that they need. So, buy a box a day, buy 2 boxes, send them to your loved ones in the Gulf, or just eat them. They're a great treat. The box is only $10.50, so buy them today before they melt. Not. Now, we have Weather with Kavin Kurian.
Kavin always keeps us informed.
Today is going to be gorgeous weather. The temperature is 44 degrees and it's sunny right now. We have temperatures in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. There are northwest winds at 9 miles an hour. The relative humidity is at 39%. The barometer is steady at 30.11 inches. What is in charge of the weather? Well, it's a high pressure ridge over the eastern part of our country. It is slipping off to the east coast very slowly, so that it has added benefit of keeping our skies clear, and also because the winds will be behind from the south. Milder temperatures sliding in upon us. As far as today is concerned, we're going to keep that sunshine because of that benevolent high pressure. Temperatures are going to climb up today into the 30s and 40s. When you're near the water, it will be warmer because of the warm water. Inland, it's going to be cold, going down to 20s. Variable winds are 5 to 10 miles an hour. Clear skies and lows will slide back generally into the 30s and 40s in the inland valleys later tonight. We are talking lower 50s in the city. And that's weather tonight. Back to you.
Well, that about wraps things up for today.
This is Sean Patton
And Dave Saxena,
saying goodbye
farewell.
and good luck. Up next, we have Geraldo, with twins born from their mother's foot, and they live to talk about it. Hear this tragic story and all the rest of the news on Geraldo next. Thank you.
Not yet. Too late, forget it, you messed up.
Messed up. Come on, Eric.
Well, that about wraps things up for today.
This is Sean Patton.
Come on, Dave.
Come on. Stop it. Stop it. Press the red button. Very interesting, Jeremy. And thank you, Dr. Lee. Sorry, do it again, do it again.
You fool!
So much damage could be caused by an oil spill.
Thank you, Sean and Dave. I'm about to talk with Dr. Ahmed Ali, who is a native citizen of Kuwait and has spent a great deal of time in the belly of the beast, so to speak. Glad to have you on the show, Ahmed.
Guys, come on! Please, we're trying to work.
Thank you, Sean and Dave. I'm about to talk with Dr. Ahmed Ali.
It's Ahmed.
Ahmed Ali. Thank you, Sean and Dave. I'm about to talk with Dr. Ahmed Ali.
It's Ahmed.
Ahmed Ali.
Very
The weather, well, it is a high press.
What? I said I'd go I was like this.
Honey, as
God.
Hard in the Persian Gulf. Protect